ultimately it's an empty life that they lead, a shockingly empty one that's just a life of destruction and not construction.
Goodfellas is hailed as one of Martin Scorsese's greatest films, but the version the world saw wasn't the full story. Real mafia enforcers slipped onto the set. Shocking scenes were cut under studio pressure, and FBI agents circled the production. None of this reached the public because Warner Brothers buried these scandals that could have destroyed careers. What really happened behind the cameras that was more dangerous than anything shown on screen? And why did the industry desperately try to silence these stories? Join us as we uncover the forbidden scenes from Goodfellas that no one was supposed to talk about. The real mafia and a serial killer infiltrated the movie set. The most terrifying secret about Goodfellas wasn't captured on film. It was happening right on the set, under everyone's noses. Dozens of real mobsters had successfully infiltrated the production by posing as background actors, using fake social security numbers and phony identities that fooled the entire casting department. Warner Brothers only discovered this massive deception when their accounting team noticed irregularities in the paperwork. Social security numbers didn't match databases. Names led to dead ends. The studio realized they had been paying actual criminals to recreate their own violent lifestyle for Hollywood cameras. The casting director's screening process had completely failed. These weren't method actors preparing for roles. They were genuine members of organized crime families who saw an opportunity to make easy money while reliving their glory days. The irony was staggering. Real gangsters were being paid to act like themselves. But the most chilling revelation came years later. Louis Ippolito, who played Fat Andy in the film, wasn't just connected to organized crime through family ties. His father, uncle, and brother were all mobsters, but Louis himself was operating as a corrupt police officer with deadly secrets. In 2005, federal investigators exposed Ippolito's double life. The man who had casually chatted with Ray Liotta and Joe Pesci between takes was actually running a killing-for-hire operation. He received a life sentence for racketeering, extortion, and 8 brutal killings. While Goodfellas was filming, a future convicted serial killer was walking around the set, sharing stories and cracking jokes with Hollywood's biggest stars. The production had unknowingly employed a man who was simultaneously wearing an NYPD badge and taking contracts to eliminate people. Ippolito's cop credentials had made him seem legitimate to the security team. Nobody questioned why a police officer wanted to appear in a mob movie. His insider knowledge of both law enforcement and criminal operations made his performance unnaturally authentic. An anonymous advisor on set possessed intimate knowledge of every real gangster portrayed in the film. This mysterious figure guided the actors on proper mob etiquette, correct terminology, and authentic behavior patterns. The advisor's identity was never revealed, but his expertise suggested direct involvement in the criminal activities being recreated. Henry Hill himself became obsessed with the production's authenticity. He maintained daily phone conversations with Robert De Niro, sharing intricate details about the real Jimmy Burke's mannerisms. Hill explained how Burke held his cigarettes, the way he poured ketchup, his walking style, and even his breathing patterns during tense situations. The real Henry Hill's involvement reached dangerous levels of cooperation. He provided information that only someone who lived inside the Lucchese crime family could possess. Details about meetings, conversations, and private moments between gangsters that had never been documented anywhere. Hill was essentially providing a masterclass in organized crime behavior. After the film's premiere, Hill's excitement overwhelmed his survival instincts. He couldn't resist bragging to paparazzi about his involvement in the production. revealing his location to photographers and reporters. This moment of Hollywood vanity cost him his life, saving anonymity. The U.S. Marshals Service immediately expelled Hill from witness protection. His 15 minutes of additional fame had destroyed the carefully constructed new identity that kept him alive. Jimmy Burke's associates still wanted him dead, and Hill had just announced where to find him. The boundary between reality and performance had completely dissolved during production. Real criminals were working alongside actors, sharing authentic stories about killings, robberies, and violence. The set had become a bizarre gathering place where Hollywood fantasy met genuine criminal history. Years later, when investigators revealed the extent of criminal involvement in the film, Warner Brothers quietly implemented new security protocols for future productions. The studio never publicly acknowledged how thoroughly their systems had been compromised. But the criminal infiltration was nothing compared to the brutal scene that nearly destroyed the entire project before audiences could see it. What happened when studio executives watched Joe Pesci's most violent performance? The brutal death scene studios desperately wanted erased. Spider's death scene almost killed Goodfellas before it reached theaters. Studio executives were so horrified by Joe Pesci's cold-blooded execution of the young gangster that they demanded its complete removal from the final cut. They argued the scene was too violent, too realistic, and would drive paying customers away from what they hoped would be a mainstream hit. The scene featured Michael Imperioli as Spider, a nervous kid working for the crew who makes the fatal mistake of talking back to Tommy DeVito. Pesci's character responds by casually shooting him dead, then returning to his conversation as if nothing had happened. The randomness and brutality of the killing captured the genuine psychopathy that defined the real Tommy DeSimone. Warner Brothers executives viewed the scene during an early screening and immediately called emergency meetings. They insisted the killing served no narrative purpose and would alienate audiences who expected traditional crime drama, not realistic depictions of senseless violence. The studio threatened to reduce the film's marketing budget if Scorsese refused to make cuts. Martin Scorsese fought back with unprecedented intensity. He argued that sanitizing the violence would betray the entire purpose of adapting Henry Hill's story. The scene wasn't included for shock value, it demonstrated the casual brutality that made these men genuinely terrifying. Removing it would transform Goodfellas into just another romanticized mob movie. The director explained that Tommy DeSimone's real-life violence was even more unpredictable and savage than what appeared on screen. The historical Tommy had killed people for minor infractions, perceived slights, and sometimes no reason at all. The Spider killing represented this authentic randomness that separated real gangsters from Hollywood's glamorized versions. Joe Pesci supported Scorsese's position, but for deeply personal reasons. He had spent months studying Tommy DeSimone's psychology, reading court documents, police reports, and witness testimonies. Pesci understood that the scene's power came from its authenticity, not its brutality. He called it the most difficult performance of his career. The actor's preparation had been exhaustive and disturbing. Pesci interviewed people who knew the real DeSimone, learning about his unpredictable mood swings and explosive violence. DeSimone could be charming and funny one moment, then kill someone the next. This psychological complexity required Pesci to access genuinely dark emotional territory. The studio's resistance created a standoff that threatened the entire production. Executives suggested alternative approaches, having Tommy wound Spider instead of killing him, moving the killing off-screen, or having Spider survive and return later. Every suggestion missed the point entirely. Scorsese's most effective argument focused on historical accuracy. The real Spider, whose name was Michael Imperioli in life as well as the film, had indeed been killed by Tommy DeSimone for exactly the reasons shown. Changing the scene would be dishonoring the actual victim and misrepresenting the true nature of organized crime. The director also pointed out that the scene's impact came from its contrast with the surrounding comedy. Tommy's violent outburst happens during what seems like a light-hearted evening among friends. This tonal whiplash reflected the genuine experience of being around dangerous criminals, never knowing when humor would turn deadly. Henry Hill later confirmed that Pesci's portrayal captured Tommy DeSimone's essence perfectly, despite the actor being 11 inches shorter and half the weight of the real killer. The physical differences became irrelevant when Pesci channeled DeSimone's unpredictable menace and hair-trigger temper. The studio eventually relented, but only after test audiences responded positively to the scene's authenticity. Preview screenings showed that viewers weren't repulsed by the violence. They were impressed by its realistic portrayal. The scene became a talking point that generated word-of-mouth publicity. Critics later praised the spider killing as one of cinema's most effective depictions of genuine psychopathy. Unlike theatrical violence that feels choreographed and dramatic, Tommy's casual killing feels spontaneous and real. The scene's power comes from its understatement, not its excess. Years later, the scene's inclusion proved commercially successful. Audiences appreciated the film's unflinching honesty about mob violence. The studio's fears about box office impact were completely unfounded. However, the spider scene wasn't the only sequence that terrified test audiences. The film's opening moments were originally so graphic that people literally fled the theater in horror. Test audiences fled the theater. The iconic trunk scene that opens Goodfellas was originally far more brutal than what audiences saw in theaters. Martin Scorsese's first cut showed Tommy DeVito stabbing Billy Batts 7 times, with every gruesome detail captured in full graphic detail. The scene begins with Henry, Tommy, and Jimmy driving through the night with what they believe is Billy Batts' corpse in their trunk. When they stop to bury the body, they discover Batts is still alive and trying to escape. In the theatrical version, Tommy stabs him 3 times to finish the job. The original cut showed all 7 stabbings in explicit, uncompromising detail. Early test screenings revealed the devastating impact of Scorsese's unedited vision. Audience members didn't just express discomfort. They physically left the theater within minutes of the film starting. Exit interviews revealed that viewers felt ambushed by the extreme violence, expecting a traditional crime drama rather than a realistic depiction of killing. The studio panicked. Having your opening scene drive away paying customers was a commercial catastrophe. Warner Brothers executives delivered an ultimatum to Scorsese: tone down the violence or face serious distribution problems. The film's entire theatrical release was at stake. Scorsese initially resisted the demand for cuts. He argued that the scene's impact was essential to establishing the character's true nature. These weren't romanticized gangsters from classic Hollywood films. They were genuine killers who took lives without remorse. Sanitizing their actions would undermine the entire narrative. The director's original vision reflected the actual brutality of Billy Batts' death. The real William Bentvena had been beaten and stabbed multiple times by Tommy DeSimone, Henry Hill, and Jimmy Burke. The killing was messy, prolonged, and savage. Scorsese wanted to show audiences what real mob violence looked like, not the clean, dramatic deaths typical of movie gangsters. The test audience data provided devastating feedback. Viewers rated the opening sequence as the most disturbing element of the entire film. Many respondents said the extreme violence made them lose interest in following the character's story. They couldn't empathize with protagonists after witnessing such brutal behavior. The studio's marketing department expressed additional concerns about the scene's impact on advertising. Television commercials and movie trailers couldn't include footage from an opening that was too graphic for broadcast standards. The scene would essentially become unmarketable, limiting promotional opportunities. Scorsese eventually agreed to a creative compromise that preserved the scene's essential impact while reducing its visual brutality. The revised version showed 3 stabbings explicitly, while moving the remaining 4 off-screen. Viewers heard the sounds of violence, but didn't see every detail. This editing decision accidentally enhanced the scene's psychological impact. The off-screen violence became more disturbing than explicit imagery because viewers' imaginations filled in the horrific details. The sounds of Billy Batts' final moments, combined with the character's casual reactions, created a more unsettling experience than graphic visuals. The compromise satisfied both artistic and commercial concerns. The scene retained its brutal honesty about mob violence while becoming palatable for mainstream audiences. Scorsese's reluctant editing created a masterclass in implying violence without showing everything. Ray Liotta's performance during the scene benefited from the editing changes. His character's nervous energy and growing panic became more prominent when extreme violence didn't dominate every moment. The actor's portrayal of Henry's psychological state gained nuance and complexity. Robert De Niro's Jimmy Burke emerged as more menacing in the edited version. His calm, professional approach to disposing of evidence contrasted sharply with Tommy's explosive violence. The character dynamics became clearer when visual brutality didn't overwhelm the performances. The final version of the trunk scene became one of cinema's most effective openings. It immediately established the character's dangerous nature without alienating audiences through excessive gore. The scene promised that viewers would witness authentic criminal behavior, not Hollywood fantasy. Critics later praised Scorsese's restraint in the opening sequence. The implied violence felt more realistic than explicit gore, because real killings aren't choreographed for visual impact. The scene's power came from its psychological authenticity, not its graphic content. But studio interference didn't end with violence. They also tried to remove what became one of the film's most beloved comedic moments, nearly creating a family crisis for Martin Scorsese. Scorsese's mother's scene was worthless until audiences revolted. Studio executives nearly destroyed one of Goodfellas' most cherished moments when they demanded the complete removal of Catherine Scorsese's dinner scene. Warner Brothers dismissed Tommy's mother, serving her son and his associates as unnecessary padding that slowed the film's pace and contributed nothing to the central narrative. The scene features Catherine Scorsese as Tommy DeVito's doting Italian mother, who prepares an elaborate late-night meal while her son and his friends casually discuss disposing of Billy Batts' body. Her maternal concern about whether they're eating enough contrasts absurdly with their conversation about killing and burial locations. Studio executives viewed the scene during rough-cut screenings and immediately flagged it for deletion. They argued that the sequence interrupted the film's momentum during a crucial section where tension should be building toward the climax. The dinner scene, they claimed, was self-indulgent filmmaking that served Martin Scorsese's personal interests rather than the story's needs. The potential removal would have created serious family complications for the director. Catherine Scorsese wasn't a professional actress. She was Martin's actual mother, whom he had specifically written into the film. Cutting her scene would mean disappointing his mother and wasting the time she had invested in preparing for her Hollywood debut. Martin Scorsese had included his mother's character because it reflected authentic Italian-American family dynamics within organized crime. The real Tommy DeSimone lived with his mother well into adulthood, and she genuinely seemed oblivious to his criminal activities. The scene captured this bizarre domestic normalcy that coexisted with extreme violence. The dinner sequence also provided essential character development for Tommy DeVito. Viewers saw how this psychopathic killer transformed into a dutiful son when interacting with his mother. The psychological complexity added depth to Joe Pesci's performance and made Tommy more three-dimensional than a simple villain. Martin Scorsese's natural performance elevated the scene beyond mere comedy. She wasn't playing a character, she was essentially being herself. An Italian mother concerned about feeding her son's friends. Her genuine maternal instincts created authentic moments that professional actors might have struggled to replicate. The scene's dark humor emerged from the collision between normal family life and criminal activity. Tommy's friends politely compliment his mother's cooking while discussing the best methods for concealing evidence. The juxtaposition was both hilarious and deeply unsettling. Studio executives completely missed the scene's thematic importance. The dinner represented how organized crime families compartmentalize their violence from their domestic lives. Killers returned home to become loving sons, maintaining the illusion of respectability even after committing brutal deaths. The film's pacing actually benefited from the dinner scene's placement. After the intense trunk sequence, viewers needed a moment to process what they had witnessed. The comedic relief allowed audiences to catch their breath before the narrative continued building toward its climax. Test audiences provided the unexpected salvation for Martin Scorsese's scene. Preview screenings revealed that viewers absolutely loved the dinner sequence, rating it among their favorite moments in the entire film. The audience response was so overwhelmingly positive that studio executives were forced to completely reverse their decision. Focus group data showed that the dinner scene made Tommy DeVito more interesting rather than less threatening. Audiences appreciated seeing the killer's relationship with his mother because it added psychological complexity to his character. The humanizing moments made his violence more disturbing, not less impactful. The scene's popularity during test screenings generated valuable word-of-mouth potential. Viewers consistently mentioned the dinner sequence when describing the film to friends, calling it hilarious and memorable. The studio realized they were about to delete one of their most marketable moments. Martin Scorsese's performance became a critical and commercial success. Critics praised her natural screen presence and authentic portrayal of Italian-American motherhood. Her brief appearance generated more positive reviews than many professional actors receive for leading roles. The funny how? Scene was real trauma. The restaurant confrontation where Tommy DeVito explodes over being called funny wasn't scripted drama. It was Joe Pesci's actual traumatic memory brought to terrifying life. The scene that defines psychological tension in cinema emerged from a genuine experience that haunted the actor for years, creating a moment so authentic that his fellow performers thought he was having a genuine breakdown. During his early career, Pesci worked as a waiter at a restaurant frequented by real mobsters. One evening, a customer made a mildly amusing comment, and young Pesci, trying to be friendly and earn a good tip, told the man he was funny. The gangster's reaction was swift and menacing, creating a memory that stayed with Pesci long after he left the service industry. The real-life incident had been genuinely terrifying for Pesci. The mobster's sudden shift from casual conversation to implied violence demonstrated the hair-trigger tempers that made these men so dangerous. Pesci realized he had unknowingly crossed an invisible line that could have had deadly consequences. When Pesci shared this story with Martin Scorsese during Goodfellas preparation, the director immediately recognized its cinematic potential. The anecdote perfectly captured the unpredictable nature of criminal personalities, how quickly humor could transform into threat, how casual interactions could become life-threatening situations. Scorsese and Pesci decided to recreate the moment, but with a twist that would make it even more psychologically powerful. On the day of filming, only Pesci and Ray Liotta knew what was about to happen. The director deliberately kept the other actors completely uninformed, wanting their genuine reactions captured on camera. The scene begins with Tommy asking Henry to elaborate on why he finds him amusing. When Henry hesitates, Tommy's demeanor gradually shifts from friendly curiosity to dangerous intensity. The tension builds as Tommy demands that Henry explain exactly what's funny about him, while the other characters grow increasingly uncomfortable. Frank Vincent, Tony Darrow, and the other actors at the table weren't performing. They were experiencing genuine confusion and fear. They had no idea whether Pesci was improvising, having a psychological episode, or genuinely becoming violent. Their visible nervousness wasn't acting. It was an authentic human response to an unpredictable situation. Ray Liotta later described the experience as genuinely unsettling. Even though he knew the scene was planned, Pesci's intense method approach made him question whether the actor had lost control. Liotta's stammering responses and nervous laughter captured the real fear of being confronted by an unstable personality. The other actors' authentic reactions elevated the scene beyond typical movie tension. Their sideways glances, nervous shifting, and obvious discomfort reflected how real people respond when witnessing someone's psychological breakdown. The performances felt documentary, real because the fear was genuine. Joe Pesci's preparation for this scene had been methodical and disturbing. He spent weeks revisiting the emotions from his original traumatic experience, allowing himself to access the genuine anger and menace that the real mobster had displayed. The performance wasn't acting. It was controlled psychological recreation. The scene's power comes from its unpredictability. Viewers never know whether Tommy will explode into violence or reveal that he's joking. This uncertainty mirrors the real experience of dealing with genuinely dangerous people, where casual conversations could suddenly become life-threatening confrontations. Scorsese's decision to keep most actors uninformed created layers of authenticity that couldn't be achieved through traditional performance techniques. The director essentially gaslit his own cast to generate genuine emotional responses, blurring the line between filmmaking and psychological experiment. The scene's climax, where Tommy reveals he was joking and the tension dissolves into laughter, reflects the real dynamics of criminal relationships. These men used intimidation and implied violence as entertainment, enjoying the fear they could generate in others. The psychological games were as important as actual brutality. Critics later identified the restaurant scene as one of cinema's most effective depictions of menace. Unlike theatrical villains who announce their evil intentions, Tommy's threat emerges from casual conversation. The scene demonstrated how really dangerous people operate through unpredictable psychological manipulation. The funny how sequence became a cultural touchstone, referenced and parodied countless times in other films and television shows. Its impact came from the authentic psychology rather than dramatic dialogue or explosive action. The scene proved that genuine human emotion created more powerful cinema than scripted theatricality. Years later, actors from the scene described it as simultaneously terrifying and educational. They had witnessed a masterclass in method acting, where Pesci channeled real trauma into a controlled performance. The experience taught them about the difference between pretending to be dangerous and actually posing a genuine menace. But even this psychologically intense scene couldn't match the technical challenges that nearly broke cinema history. How did a comedy legend's memory lapse destroy what should have been the film's most celebrated single take? The Copa shot nearly broke cinema. The legendary Copacabana tracking shot required an extraordinary level of technical precision that pushed filmmaking technology beyond its limits. What appears as a seamless 3-minute journey through the nightclub's back entrance, kitchen corridors, and main dining room actually demanded 8 separate attempts over 3 grueling days, with the most heartbreaking failure coming from an unexpected source. Camera operator Larry McConkey faced an unprecedented technical challenge. He had to navigate a Steadicam through narrow service corridors, busy kitchen spaces filled with working staff, crowded dining areas packed with extras, and multiple level changes, all while maintaining perfect framing and focus. A single misstep would destroy the entire take. The sequence begins in the street, follows Henry and Karen through the club's rear entrance, down a flight of stairs, through the bustling kitchen where staff continue their normal duties, along narrow hallways lined with equipment, and finally into the main dining room where a table materializes at the perfect moment for their arrival. Every element required precise choreography. Kitchen staff had to maintain authentic cooking activities while staying out of camera range. Dining room extras needed to create a realistic atmosphere without interfering with camera movement. The table placement had to be timed perfectly to appear effortless while actually requiring split-second coordination. Lighting presented massive challenges across multiple environments. The kitchen's harsh fluorescent fixtures, the hallway's dim service lighting, and the dining room's romantic ambiance all needed to blend seamlessly, despite their completely different color temperatures and intensities. The cinematography team spent weeks calculating exposure settings. Sound recording faced a similar complexity. Dialogue had to remain clear while capturing authentic kitchen noise, corridor conversations, and dining room atmosphere. The audio team used multiple recording strategies, knowing they couldn't rely on post-production fixes for such a long, continuous take. Ray Liotta and Lorraine Bracco rehearsed their movements extensively, memorizing not just their dialogue, but the precise timing of every step, turn, and gesture. They had to hit exact marks while delivering natural performances, maintaining character chemistry despite the technical demands surrounding them. The Steadicam itself was cutting-edge technology that few operators had mastered. McConkey had to maintain perfect balance while navigating obstacles, climbing stairs, and adjusting to the different spatial requirements of each environment. The equipment's weight and bulk made extended takes physically exhausting. The first 5 attempts failed for various technical reasons: camera focus problems, lighting inconsistencies, timing errors with the extras, and equipment malfunctions forced repeated restarts. Each failure meant resetting hundreds of people, adjusting complex lighting setups, and beginning the entire sequence again. The 6th attempt achieved technical perfection. Every element functioned flawlessly: camera movement, lighting transitions, actor performances, extra coordination, and equipment operation. The take was proceeding exactly as Scorsese had envisioned, with each section flowing seamlessly into the next. The sequence was designed to conclude with Henry and Karen taking their front row seats to watch comedian Henny Youngman perform his act. Youngman, a legendary Borscht Belt comedian famous for his rapid-fire one-liners, was supposed to deliver one of his trademark jokes to complete the shot. After navigating the entire complex sequence perfectly, with every technical element functioning exactly as planned, Henny Youngman forgot his line. The 82-years-old comedian, despite decades of professional experience, simply went blank at the crucial moment. The perfect take that had required extraordinary coordination from hundreds of people was destroyed by a memory lapse. The crew's devastation was visible on set. Months of preparation, days of failed attempts, and one perfect execution had been ruined in the final seconds. The entire cast and crew had to reset completely, knowing they might never achieve such technical perfection again. Scorsese's reaction mixed disappointment with determination. The director knew they had captured something special, but he also understood that filmmaking often requires patience with human error. Youngman's mistake was frustrating, but not malicious. It was simply the reality of working with an elderly performer. The 7th and 8th attempts finally achieved the complete take that became cinema history. The technical achievement was so remarkable that the shot has been studied in film schools for decades. The seamless movement through multiple environments created an immersive experience that made viewers feel present in Henry's world. The Copacabana sequence revolutionized tracking shot techniques and inspired countless imitations. The shot demonstrated how camera movement could serve storytelling by making audiences experience the protagonist's elevated status and insider access to exclusive environments. The near disaster with Henny Youngman became part of the shot's legend. The fact that such technical perfection could be destroyed by human error emphasized how extraordinary the final achievement was. The successful take required not just technical skill, but incredible luck and persistence. Years later, Larry McConkey's camera work on the Copacabana sequence became a defining moment in his career. The shot showcased how technical innovation could serve emotional storytelling, creating one of cinema's most celebrated and analyzed moments. The sequence's impact on popular culture extended far beyond film appreciation. The shot became shorthand for cinematic excellence, referenced and parodied in countless productions. Its technical achievement proved that practical filmmaking could create more powerful experiences than computer-generated alternatives. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check out another interesting video by clicking on the video shown on your screen. See you on the other side.